Happy New Year, everybody! Welcome to your first recipe of your 2025 recipe calendar. Today we're going to make one of my favorite desserts. It's called apple tart tatin. I fell in love with this recipe first in pastry school, and I had to make it for my mom for her birthday every year since. That's why it's the recipe for January, because my mom's birthday is January 24th. To start this recipe, we are going to make our pie dough. To start this, you have all-purpose flour. We're going to add just a little bit of sugar to this. I don't like an overly sweet dough, but I like just a little bit. So we're adding 2 teaspoons of sugar. Then we are also adding salt. It is very important. Do not forget the salt. I use coarse sea salt. Just half a teaspoon of that. Now we have all of our dry, and we have to get our butter out of the fridge. It is very important that your butter is very cold. I've already cut it up into small pieces so it's easier to break apart. I'm gonna pour all that in. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick it up and press it between my fingers and crumble it up. We wanna break these into tiny pieces. If you have hot hands, I recommend using a food processor and pulse it a few times. Or you can use a fork or a pastry blender. When we're done with this, it's gonna resemble cornmeal or like Bisquick, where it's just a little chunky. Okay, so this step is very important. You wanna make sure that you press the butter apart just until there's no pieces larger than a pea. What's happening is the butter is covering the flour and it's going to protect it from absorbing water. If you overdo this, you'll have a sticky dough. If you underdo it, then you'll have a really dry, crumbly dough. So this is what we're looking for. Now, we're going to grab our water that has been measured out and put in the fridge to stay nice and cold. I'm gonna try and not make a mess on everything, but I'm leaving a handprint on the fridge. Okay. So I always leave just a little bit of water left in my cup just in case my flour is not ready to absorb all of it. I might not need it all. You can always add more, you can't take it out. Just a little bit. And then I just slowly get all the flour wet. There's a little more that doesn't quite want to grab it all, so I think we're gonna use it all. Now that it is starting to all stick together in large clumps, I'm going to just pull it up and press it a few times in the bowl until it starts to kind of resemble a dough. And then I'm going to dump it out on my counter here. Now at this point, I'm flattening it and just folding it over on itself no more than like 4 or 5 times. The more you work it, the more you work that gluten in there, and that makes a tough dough. This is looking pretty good. If you've got dough stuck to your fingers, just rub them back and forth. That'll clean it all off. Okay, we're starting to get on our last press. Now at this point, I'm shaping it into a little dough ball circle. Just pressing it together with my hands. See how loose it is still? It's still very squishy, but it's not sticky at all. If you look closely, you should be able to see little bits of butter throughout the dough. And that's gonna make the nice pockets of air so they're nice and crispy after it bakes. We're going to wrap it up in plastic wrap and stick it in the fridge. This is not only because it needs to relax, because if you were to roll this out right now, it might keep shrinking and shrinking. But we need that butter to get nice and cold so it's easier to work with. All right, just nice and tight. Flatten it a little bit at this point so it's easier to roll out. And chill. Now it's time to work with our apples. Cameraman. Gotta pause everything and clean up.
And cut.
So this tart is all about the nice yummy caramel that you create and the apples that become nice and tender as they bake on top of the stove. So to start the caramel sauce, we are using half a stick of butter And we want this to be nice and soft because we're going to rub it all over the bottom of the pan. So usually I use a cast iron skillet or any kind of pan that has a nice metal handle that you can put into your oven safely. Somehow today I have neither of those, but if you don't have either of those, don't feel like you have to go out and purchase one. Anything metal or stovetop safe and oven safe can work for this. So today, in a makeshift moment, I'm using this cake pan here. Here we go. And now we're going to sprinkle that butter with sugar. Try and evenly distribute this just like that. Let's talk about apples. For this tart, you want to have a nice firm apple, so a Macintosh would not be a good idea. We're going to use Pink Ladies because they're kind of my favorite apples to eat. We need to peel these apples. Once you've got all your apples peeled, we're now just going to quarter them. So, cut them in half, and then half again. Get that core out of there, and you can start arranging them inside of your pan. We're going to have the cut side up. This is why I like to have my pan ready so I can just place them right inside. So I have sliced all of my apples and I'm arranging them tightly inside of my pan. And this is just because they're going to shrink a little bit as they cook. We want to make sure we have apples all around. Now that these are ready, I'm going to go ahead and set these on the stove. I'm not going to start cooking yet because we need to roll out our pie dough. The pie dough needs to be ready to go on top of this as soon as it's done cooking, because if it cooks too long, then the sugar is going to burn and you're going to have a ruined tart. Alright, I've gotten our dough out of the fridge. It is nice and firm. We are going to use a little bit of flour for dusting. Just lightly sprinkle that on top of your counter and a little bit on top of the dough. I like to press it a little bit with my hands. Make sure it's not sticking, so always move your dough around to make sure it's not stuck to the counter. I have my French rolling pin here, and I just love the shape of this rolling pin. If you're going to do a lot of bread making or dough making, I highly suggest you pick one of these up. We're going to start rolling it in an X motion. So I go one way, then the other way, and then I give it a little quarter turn. The turn helps to give you more of the dough, and it also makes sure that it's not stuck to the table. We want to make sure that it's just about the size of our pan. I have a little bit further to go. If you start to get a little misshapen, just press around the edges and get it back into that circle. Because it's nice and cold and not sticky, it's easy to pick up. That looks great. We are going to put this on a cookie sheet, nice and flat, put it into the fridge so it's really cold and easy to pick up when our apples are ready. Now let's go cook our apples on the stove. Alright, this is when you have to work quickly. I've made sure that my apples are arranged beautifully right now because the way that they are is exactly how they're going to be when we flip them out of the pan. So go ahead and use that fork and shuffle them around. We have our dough out of the fridge. We're going to take a fork and just dock it. This way it doesn't shrink a ton while it bakes. Now carefully pick it up and set it on top of those apples. That looks good enough for me. Let's get it in our 400-degree oven until it's nice and golden brown. Here we go. Now you just wait for about 30 to 40 minutes. Keep an eye on it. And make sure you pick out the plate that you're going to serve it on because we're going to have to flip it out as soon as it comes out of the oven. The crust is nice and golden brown. It looks, oh, it sounds great. You can hear it bubbling in there. Now here comes the scary part. I have to try and flip this.
Oh no.
I know.
That does smell good.
It does smell really good. I've got a plate that is larger than my pan. I have my towel here that goes on either side, so I pretend like it's a little easier to grab, get a good grip, and just commit. Lift. Ooh. Okay, alright. That looks looks nice. That looks great. Oh my goodness. Ah. Now, it's okay if you have some goo that has gone around the edge of your plate.
I'm gonna see.
What do you think?
Oh.
Do you like it? He fainted.
I just did that because it looks so nice.
Thank you. I'm just going to wipe up the edges before they completely cool. And this is just for photos and presentation. But if you're at home, you can just leave it. Alright, if you're making this at home, you want to serve this up as soon as possible. Nice and warm and gooey out of the oven. Go ahead and top it with some vanilla bean ice cream, and it's going to be amazing, I promise. Alright guys, I'll see you in February. Bye.
Bye.